is SMNI News Channel. Truth that matters.
In the headlines, a three-front crisis is deepening in the skies over the Lebanon, on the waters of the Persian Gulf, and in the hallways of diplomacy. Qatar is pushing back against suggestions that it's brokering peace between Washington and Tehran. President Trump claims negotiations with Iran are actively underway. Tehran flatly denies it, and now Doha says it is not playing a direct mediation role between the two sides either. The United Arab Emirates is calling for what it is economic terrorism. The UAE is issuing a scathing rebuke of the weaponization of the Strait of Hormuz following strikes on ADNOC energy facilities as the Iranian blockade drives global oil prices up 50%. The warning from Abu Dhabi: no nation is immune from what happens next. Israel and Lebanon shows no signs of stopping. Sustained Israeli airstrikes have reduced entire blocks of Beirut's southern suburbs to rubble, as the death toll in Lebanon climbs past 1,000 since the conflict erupted in early March. Kim Jong-un labeled South Korea the most hostile nation on earth and vowed that North Korea's status as a nuclear-armed state is on an irreversible course across the globe. Back home, the Philippines is under a state of national emergency, energy emergency. President Marcos Jr. is warning of possible fuel supply disruptions. But even as that alarm is raised, airlines and some government officials are insisting supplies remain stable. Some senators are now backing a proposal to study whether the Philippines should postpone hosting the ASEAN summit this year, citing the need to conserve government funds at a time when the country is managing an energy emergency and rising global uncertainty. China is playing two hands at once. Beijing criticized Japan over recent remarks on Taiwan, warning of strained ties. Then, in the same breath, called for a ceasefire and peaceful dialogue amid escalating tensions between the US and Iran. And on a lighter ground, Disney has dropped the second trailer for its live-action Moana, with Dwayne Johnson back as the Maui, and fans are getting their most complete look yet at the magical island world they grew up loving. I'm Carlo De La Peña. Newsline World starts now. For our news, Iran's energy minister has dismissed President Trump's ultimatum to target the country's power grid, arguing that Tehran's decentralized network makes it less vulnerable to attack than the centralized system of Israel and the Gulf states. This story from Almar Forzuelo.
Breaking cover from an undisclosed location, Iranian Energy Minister Abbas Ali-Abadi addressed the nation on Tuesday following a series of Israeli strikes on desalination plants and substations in Qashem and Tehran. Ali-Abadi sought to project calm, claiming that Iran's reliance on over 160 widely distributed power plants and 1,000 renewable sites provides a strategic buffer that its neighbors lack. He characterized the targeting of electricity and water as a violation of international treaties, equating the strikes to a direct assault on civilians.
ما برق به صورت پراکنده تولید میکنیم. یعنی در سرتاسر کشور ما نیروگاه داریم. ما الان در حال حاضر عدد دقیقی تو ذهنم نیست. ولی فکر کنم تعداد نیروگاه ما متجاوز از 150-160 تا نیروگاه میشه که به صورت گسترده در سراسر کشور پخش شدن. یا نیروگاه‌های تجدیدپذیر ما شاید بیش از 1000 نقطه کشور ما نیروگاه داریم. در حالی که در کشورهای حاشیه خلیج فارس، در اسرائیل که دشمن اصلی ما الان هست، اینا به طور متمرکز برق رو تولید میکنن. لذا خیلی آسیب پذیر هستن و این برج‌ها اگر چنانچه برقشون تامین نشه غیر قابل استفاده میشن و مردم اونجا به شدت میتونن تحت تاثیر این مشکل قرار بگیرن که ما کمتر با این مشکل مواجه هستیم.
Ali-Abadi also issued a sharp warning to neighboring Gulf countries, suggesting that the US-led threats are a profit-seeking scheme for American firms like General Electric. He argued that since Gulf states are not manufacturers, any damage to their infrastructure would result in a massive loss of wealth to Western contractors. Despite the minister's optimistic tone, he confirmed that 6 rockets recently struck the Keshim Island desalination plant, cutting off essential water for residents. Tehran has already launched retaliatory strikes against regional energy hubs in response.
آب شیرین کن و نیروگاه قشم رو مورد اصابت 6 تا راکت قرار دادن که خب ضربه به حساب سختی هم در پاسخ بهشون داده شد توسط نیروهای مسلح کشور و مردم قشم وابسته به این نیروگاه بودن، وابسته هم آبشون هم برقشون وابسته به اونجا بود که این نیروگاه مال بخش خصوصی هم بود که این نیروگاه رو به طور کلی زدن و ما در فاصله زمانی خیلی کمی تونستیم نیاز حداقلی مردم رو جبران میکنیم و فکر میکنم تا انشالله 1-2 ماه دیگه هم به طور کلی مشکل رو برطرف میکنیم از طریق در واقع روش‌هایی که همکاران من قبلا تمرین کردن.
As President Trump's 5-day extension on his obliteration deadline continues to tick down, the Iranian leadership appears to be digging in. For Tehran, the battle for the grid is no longer just a military concern, but a test of a national survival against what they call an all-encirclement. Reported for Newsline World, Almar Forsualo, SMNA News.
The Granma 2.0 humanitarian flotilla has successfully docked in Havana, delivering 30 tons of essential supplies and directly challenging the U.S. energy encirclement gripping the island. The story from Faith Agustin.
The vessel Granma 2.0 completed its 370 nautical mile journey from Mexico on Tuesday, greeted by supporters as it entered Havana harbor. Part of the broader Nuestra America Solidarity movement, the convoy successfully brought in 14 tons of food and medicine, along with 73 high-capacity solar panels intended to provide a critical lifeline for hospitals struggling amid Cuba's nationwide power grid failures. Brazilian activist Thiago Avila, speaking from the vessel during the final leg of the journey, described the mission as a pedagogical defiance of President Trump's energy blockade. He argued that the delivery of solar technology is a strategic blow to the Monroe Doctrine, providing renewable energy to a nation that has seen its oil shipments cut off for 3 months. The arrival comes at a critical moment for the Cuban government. With the national electrical system having collapsed twice in the last week, the influx of medical supplies and decentralized energy equipment is being hailed as a major victory for international solidarity. Avila noted the irony of a humanitarian mission fearing military interference from the U.S. coast while carrying life-saving goods. He pointed to Cuba's history of exporting doctors and teachers as the reason why over 30 countries have now joined this grassroots coalition to break the Caribbean blockade. With the cargo now being unloaded for distribution, the Granma 2.0 stands as a floating symbol of regional resistance. While the White House remains preoccupied with its ultimatum in the Middle East, this successful solidarity caravan proves that the blockade is no longer impenetrable. This has been Faith Agustin, your citizen correspondent, reporting for Newsline World.
Israel and Lebanon show no signs of stopping soon. Sustained Israeli airstrikes have reduced entire blocks of Beirut's southern suburbs to rubble, as the death toll in Lebanon climbs past 1,000 since the conflict erupted in early March. Destruction blankets Beirut's southern suburbs after weeks of relentless strikes. Footage shows collapsed homes reduced to twisted metal and concrete, while those still standing are heavily scarred. The Israel Defense Forces say the attacks are precise, targeting Hezbollah infrastructure. Residents reject that claim, calling the bombardment collective punishment on a densely populated area. The toll is mounting. Lebanese officials report at least 1,039 dead and nearly 3,000 injured since March 2. Over 1 million people, almost a fifth of the population, have been displaced, deepening the humanitarian crisis. Economists said the war is costing Lebanon around $100 million a day, worsening an already fragile economy. In the south, Tyre remains under thick smoke as Israeli forces and Hezbollah exchange heavy fire. Hezbollah says it entered the conflict following the killing of Ali Khamenei. opening a full-scale front with no clear end. With deeper ground operations approved, the long campaign now unfolds across Lebanon's shattered cities. U.S. Senator John Millen is now the United States Homeland Security Secretary, despite past remarks calling war ugly and scrutiny over his private security record. Paul Montibon reports.
On this vote, the ayes are 54, the nays are 45. The nomination of Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma to be Secretary of Homeland Security is confirmed.
U.S. Senator John Mullen has been confirmed as the new Homeland Security Secretary, replacing former Secretary Kristi Noem. This is despite controversies surrounding his past remarks and private security work. The former mixed martial artist previously sparked a debate when he said that war is ugly, comments that some critics argue show a lack of support for military operations. Mullen has never served in the military, and before entering the U.S. Senate as a representative from Oklahoma in 2023, he competed as a professional mixed martial arts fighter. Mullen has also made suggestions in the media of private security work and special assignments in the Middle East, but his has not been confirmed. His opponents, however, described this part of his record as shady, but supporters argue that Mullen's experience in both security and leadership positions him to handle the department's challenges. Later, Mullen was sworn in for the position in a ceremony at the White House with President Donald Trump.
I think that was the most nervous I've ever been. It just seems surreal being in the Oval Office and having the President of the United States speak so highly of me and then recognize my family and know my family by name. It's humbling.
The confirmation marks what many describe as a fight of his life, as Mullen now faces the task of leading the United States Homeland Security efforts amid ongoing domestic and international threats. Reporting for Newsline World, this has been Paul Montibon, SMNA News.
Up next, Kim Jong-un labeled South Korea the most hostile nation on earth and vowed that North Korea's status as a nuclear-armed state is on an irreversible course across the globe. And China is playing two hands at once. Beijing criticized Japan over recent remarks on Taiwan, warning of strained ties. Then, in the same breath, called for a ceasefire and peaceful dialogue amid escalating tensions between the US and Iran. More news when Newsline World returns.
Isang pindot lang, pwede kang maka-jackpot. Mukhang masaya at easy money lang. Sa murang halaga, pwede ka na tumaya sa online gambling at e-casino apps. Mayroong sabong, slot machines, mahjong, poker at iba pa. Kailangan mo lang ng smartphone, e-wallet at internet. Pero ang aliw na ito, unti-unting nagiging bitag para sa mga Pilipino. Lalo na kung ang paborito mong artista o influencer ang mukha ng app. Mas madaling makaengganyo, diba? Parang safe naman kasi may kilalang mukha. Pero sa likod ng ngiti, sugal pa rin ang itinutulak. At syempre, mas madali ring itago ang pagkalulong sa bisyong ito. Walang pisikal na kasino o pasugalan, walang kaharap, walang accountability, kaya't mas lumalala ang adiksyon. Dagdag pa rito, maraming online gambling apps at walang regulasyon. Sa likod ng mga makukulay na interface at papremyo, nakatago ang problemang bumabalot ngayon sa bansa. Ang pagkalulong ng maraming Pilipino sa online gambling. Pwede maglaro kahit saan, kahit kailan, kahit sino, bata man o matanda, pwedeng malulong. Ayon sa mga eksperto, ang pagkakalulong sa online gambling ay nagdudulot ng matinding stress at anxiety, pagkakabaon sa utang, pagkawasak ng pamilya, pagkawala ng tiwala sa sarili. At tulad ng ibang bisyo, may mga senyales ito tulad ng hindi makapagpigil kahit walang pera, palihim na tumataya, pagpapabaya sa trabaho, pamilya o sarili. Sa bawat taya, may mga taong tunay na kumikita, mga malalaking negosyante at investors na negosyo ang bisyo ng masa. Para sa kanila, perang pumapasok lang ito. Pero para sa ordinaryong Pilipino, kabuhayan kaibigan at relasyon ang nauubos at ang masakit tila matagal itong nahayaan. Hindi ito naging prioridad ng mga nakaupo sa taas hanggang sa sobrang lumala at halos naapektuhan na ang buong komunidad. Ngayon, sa dami ng nalulung at sa laki ng pinsalang naidulot, saka palalong umugong ang mga panukalang batas para higpitan ng online gambling, gaya ng pagbabawal sa paggamit ng e-wallets para tumaya, pagtaas ng minimum bet, mas mahigpit na identity verification, pag-block ng mga illegal na gambling sites, at bawasan o ipagbawal ang mga ads na target ang kabataan. Maaari itong magmukhang laro lang, pero sa katotohanan, isa itong sugal sa kinabukasan. Ang kita na dapat sa mga pangunahing pangangailangan o ipon na uubos sa sugal. At sa mundo ng online gambling, mas madali kang matalo kaysa manalo. Huwag hayaang sugal ang magdikta sa iyong buhay. Isang paalala mula sa SM9.
Pagod? Nanunuyo ang lalamunan? O baka naman nahihirapan kang mag-focus sa ginagawa? Kapartner, baka naman dehydrated ka na. Ang katawan natin ay binubuo ng halos 60% hanggang 70% na tubig. Kung walang sapat na hydration, parang sasakyang walang gasolina ang ating katawan, hindi makakaarangkada. Bakit nga ba mahalaga ang tamang hydration? Hindi lamang ito pamatid uhaw dahil nakatutulong rin ito sa pagdaloy ng sustansya sa katawan, pagpapanatili ng tamang body temperature, at pagpapakinis ng kutis. Kaya't huwag nang hintayin pang mauhaw ka bago uminom. Ang pagkauhaw ay babala na ng iyong katawan na ikaw ay dehydrated na. Ang standard na payo ng mga doktor ay 8 baso ng tubig ang dapat inumin bawat araw. Pero tandaan, depende ito sa iyong timbang, edad at kung gaano ka ka-active. Samantala, narito ang ilang gabay para manatiling hydrated. Simula ng araw sa isang basong tubig, magbaon ng sariling tumbler para siguradong may maiinom saan man magpunta. At hanggat maaari, piliin ang tubig kaysa mga matatamis na inumin. Kaya mga kapartner, manatiling hydrated para makaiwas sa mas malalang sakit at upang maalagaan ang iyong kalusugan.
Back in the news, Kim Jong-un labeled South Korea the most hostile nation and vowed that North Korea's status as a nuclear-armed state is on an irreversible course. At the 15th Supreme People's Assembly in Pyongyang, Kim emphasized that Pyongyang will continue to develop its military capabilities in response to what he described as growing threats from its southern neighbor and its allies. Analysts say the comments signal a hardening of North Korea's stance amid ongoing regional tensions and ongoing international concerns over the country's weapons programs. Kim also called for domestic unity and strengthened defenses, highlighting the government's commitment to safeguarding the country's sovereignty against perceived external pressure. China criticized Japan over remarks on Taiwan, warning of strained ties, while also calling for a ceasefire and peaceful dialogue amid escalating tensions between the US and Iran. Joy Tabanao for the details.
China has criticized Japan over its stance on Taiwan, warning that recent remarks by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi have strained bilateral relations.
中日关系当前局面的根源在于日本首相高市早苗发表涉台谬论，激起中国人民的公愤，挑战战后国际秩序的红线。日方如果真心想改善和发展中日关系，就应恪守中日4个政治文件和自身所作承诺，尽早撤回错误涉台言论，认真反思纠偏，以实际行动维护中日关系政治基础。
Beijing says the comments have crossed what it describes as a red line and is urging Tokyo to adhere to existing political agreements between the two countries. Meanwhile, China also weighed in on rising tensions in the Middle East following reports that U.S. President Donald Trump has postponed potential strikes on Iran's power facilities.
战事延宕不符合任何一方利益，停火止战、停火对话是唯一的出路。中方对当前的局势不断升级外溢，冲击地区和国际和平稳定深感担忧。呼吁相关各方立即停火止战，尽快回到和平对话的轨道上来。
China expressed concern over the escalating situation, calling on all parties to halt hostilities and return to peaceful dialogue to preserve regional and global stability. This has been Joy Dimanao, your global citizen correspondent reporting for Newsline World.
Vice President Sara Duterte skipped today's impeachment hearing before the House Committee on Justice, with her legal team citing constitutional objections as a reason for her absence, Prince Tripoli reports.
Vice President Sara Duterte's defense team confirmed Monday that the Vice President will not appear before the House Committee on Justice. The committee had earlier declared the third and fourth impeachment complaints against the Vice President sufficient in ground. In a text message sent to SMNA News, legal counsel attorney Michael Poa said they submitted a formal letter to the committee informing it of their decision following the constitutional objections they had already filed. Committee Chairperson Jervil Luistro has described the hearings as a mini trial, but VP Sara's defense team rejected that framing, arguing the process cannot be called a trial when their side is barred from cross-examining witnesses. They also stressed that under the Philippine Constitution, any formal impeachment trial must be held before the Senate, which serves as the impeachment court. Reporting for Newsline World, this has been Prince Tripoli, SMNA News.
Qatar is pushing back against suggestions it is brokering peace between Washington and Tehran, as President Trump claims negotiations with Iran are actively underway, a claim Tehran flatly denies. Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesperson Majid Al-Ansari said Tuesday that while Doha supports all diplomatic efforts to end the war, it is not playing a direct mediation role between the two sides, and that it's hands full dealing with the fallout of attacks on its own soil, saying, to recall, Trump said Iran now means business and that discussions had taken place and were ongoing, expressing optimism that a deal could be reached soon. Iran's foreign ministry...
I know my whole life has been a negotiation, but with Iran we've been negotiating for a long time. And this time they mean business. And it's only because of the great job that our military did is the reason they mean business. They want to settle and we're going to get it done. Hopefully this will be possible, but no matter what, we'll ensure that Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
Iran's foreign ministry rejected Trump's claims, accusing him of fabrication to manipulate energy markets and drive oil prices down. The diplomatic back and forth is unfolding against an increasingly volatile military backdrop. Trump had given Iran a 48-hour deadline over the weekend to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, threatening to obliterate Iranian power plants, starting with the largest if Tehran refused. He later said via social media that he was postponing those strikes for 5 days. But Iranian media reported that at least 2 critical energy facilities, one in Khorramshahr and another in Isfahan, were struck by airstrikes early Tuesday morning. Neither the US nor Israel has claimed responsibility. When we return, the Philippines is under a state of national emergency or national energy emergency. President Marcos Jr. is warning of possible fuel supply disruptions. But even as that alarm is raised, airlines and some government officials are insisting supply remains stable. Some senators are now backing a proposal to study whether the Philippines should postpone hosting the ASEAN summit this year. citing the need to conserve government funds at a time when the country is managing an energy emergency and rising global uncertainty. And on a lighter ground, Disney has dropped the second trailer for its live-action Moana with Dwayne Johnson back as Maui. And fans are getting their most complete look yet at the magical island world they grew up loving. Newsline World will be back after the break.
Diretsahan. Walang paligoy-ligoy.
This fuel crisis with the high inflation is the nail that will seal the coffin of BBM for 2028. Whoever endorses as a candidate will receive his kiss of death.
Abangan mamayang gabi sa SMNI.
But we just keep on praying for our country, pray for your leaders, and next time, make this a lesson. Choose your leaders wisely. In 2028, yan ang pagkakataon natin talaga.
Ang mainit at talakayan.
Importante rin yung talagang willing, hindi walang takot. Nakatulad mo na willing tumayo kasi sinasabi mo lang yung katotohanan.
Walang uurungan.
Sa totoo lang.
Makakasama nila Attorney Rowena Guanzon at Miss Cathy Binag, si former Bagong Henerasyon Party List Representative Bernadette Herrera upang himayin ang mga napapanahong issue at kontrobersyal na kinakaharap ng bansa. Walang iiwasan.
Ang gusto ko, mag-ambassador to China, si Tariela. Siya ang humingi doon na bibili tayo ng fuel.
Walang paligoy-ligoy. Sa totoo lang, ang usapang diretsahan para sa bawat Pilipino. Mamayang gabi sa SMNI pagkatapos ng News Blast.
Boto niyo yung mga bright. Huwag nyo na iboto yung mga hindi na bright. Kawatan pa.
We're back. Some senators backed the proposal to study whether the Philippines should postpone hosting the ASEAN Summit, aiming to save government funds. Angel Pastor reports.
Senate leaders support the proposal to study the possible postponement of the Philippines' hosting of the ASEAN Summit amid the worsening impact of the Middle East conflict on the economy. According to Senate President Vicente Soto III, the government should consider the suggestion made by former Finance Secretary Gary Teves, adding that this could be the right time to consider such a move, especially if it would help save government funds. Senate President Pro Tempore Ping Lacson also expressed support, noting that neighboring Southeast Asian countries would likely understand if the Philippines' hosting were delayed. The proposal aims to postpone the ASEAN Summit and related meetings so that over 17 billion pesos in allocated funds could instead be used for more urgent programs, such as aid for those affected by rising fuel prices. For Senator Amy Marcos, spending such a large sum on a single event is not practical given the country's current situation. She added that if postponement isn't possible, the event could be simplified to reduce costs. The meetings could also be used to seek support from oil-producing countries such as Brunei, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Senator Sherwin Gatchalian also supports the idea, saying it's better to reduce expenses if the postponement cannot proceed. The 48th ASEAN Summit is scheduled to be held in Cebu this May and the 49th Summit in Pasay this November, alongside other meetings as part of the Philippines' role as host country. For God and my beloved Philippines, Angel Pastor, SMNI News.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has declared a state of national energy emergency as the war in the Middle East threatens the Philippines' oil supply and drives fuel prices to punishing levels. Cresilyn Catarong reports.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. signed an executive order declaring a state of national energy emergency. This comes amid ongoing conflict in the Middle East, which poses a threat to the country's sufficient and stable energy supply. According to the Department of Energy, the unrest involving the United States, Israel, and Iran has affected global oil production and transportation. As a result, energy supply has become uncertain, oil deliveries are being delayed, and oil prices are rising worldwide. In addition, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, an important route for oil shipments, has further slowed the flow of petroleum products in the global market. Since the Philippines imports most of its oil, the country becomes more vulnerable in situations like this. The declaration draws on Republic Act 7638, the Department of Energy Act of 1992, which empowers the President to declare a critical energy shortage and implement conservation and distribution measures in response. The executive order also formalizes the Unified Package for Livelihoods, Industry, Food, and Transport, or UPLIFT, as the government's consolidated plan to address the crisis. It aims to ensure sufficient energy supply in the country, maintain the operation of essential services, prevent economic disruption, and protect citizens, especially the poor. An UPLIFT committee will be established under the President's leadership, drawing in multiple government agencies to oversee implementation. The executive order also directs concerned departments, agencies, offices, and instrumentalities to carry out necessary response measures. Local government units are strongly urged to support the national government in implementing these measures and to allocate funds and personnel to lessen the impact of disruptions in the global fuel supply. The state of national energy emergency takes effect immediately and will remain in force for 1 year unless extended or lifted earlier by the President. Reporting for Newsline World, this has been Cresilyn Catarong, SMNI News.
With the Philippines now under a state of national energy emergency, President Marcos Jr. is warning of possible fuel supply disruptions. But even as the alarm is raised, airlines and some government officials are insisting supply remains stable, leaving Filipinos confused about the real state of affairs. Hannah Jane Sancho tells us more.
In an interview with Bloomberg, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. revealed that some countries are refusing to refuel Philippine aircraft, forcing airlines to adjust operations, particularly long-haul flights.
Several countries have said we cannot fuel your aircraft, so you will have to carry the fuel there and back. And that's around here, where the long haul is going to be a much more serious problem.
The president warned that the situation could escalate into flight disruptions across the aviation sector. The warning stands in sharp contrast to the government's earlier messaging. Palace Officer Undersecretary Claire Castro earlier maintained that the Philippines was not experiencing an oil crisis, describing the situation instead as a price disruption, driven by rising global petroleum costs. But as tensions escalated, the president moved to formally declare a national energy emergency, citing supply risks, geopolitical instability in the Middle East, and disruptions in key oil routes such as the Strait of Hormuz. The declaration activates emergency powers to secure fuel supply, enforce conservation measures, and prevent hoarding and profiteering, while rolling out the government's UPLIFT program to cushion the impact on transport, food, and vulnerable sectors. The Philippines remain highly exposed to global shocks, with 98% of its crude oil imports coming from the Middle East, making it vulnerable to supply disruptions and price volatility. Signs of strain are already emerging in the aviation sector. Cebu Pacific has announced it will cut parts of its air national network, suspend selected routes until October, and reduce flights frequencies due to soaring jet fuel costs. Despite the emergency declaration, officials maintain that supply remains sufficient. Energy Secretary Sharon Green earlier assured that airlines have secured fuel orders. Flag carrier Philippine Airlines echoed the assurance, saying operations remain supported. Still, rising fuel prices are already rippling through the broader economy, pushing up transport costs and adding to inflationary pressure, while a weakening peso adds burden on the Philippines' import-dependent energy sector. Amid the crisis, Marcos also signaled a possible shift in policy, saying tensions could push the Philippines and China toward joint energy exploration in the West Philippine Sea.
We're hoping not, but it's a possibility. It's a distinct possibility.
From no oil crisis to a full-blown national emergency, the Marcos administration's shifting message underscores the growing uncertainty, leaving Filipinos bracing for the real impact on fuel, flights, and daily life. For God and the beloved country, the Philippines, this has been Hannah Jane Sancho, SMNI News.
The United Arab Emirates has issued a scathing rebuke of the weaponization of the Strait of Hormuz, labeling it economic terrorism against all nations following strikes on ADNOC energy facilities. Details and more from Joy Tabanao.
Amid spiraling tensions in the Gulf, UAE Minister of Industry and Advanced Technology Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber broke his silence following a series of unprovoked attacks on the country's civilian energy infrastructure. Al Jaber warned that the attempt to choke the Strait of Hormuz, the artery for nearly 20% of the world's oil, is not merely an assault of one nation, but on the entire global economy. In just 3 weeks, the price of oil has surged by 50%, straining families and industries from factories to farms worldwide.
When Hormuz is squeezed, the pressure is immediately felt around the world. In just 3 weeks, the price of oil has risen by 50%. This is raising the cost of living for those who can least afford it and slowing economic growth everywhere, from factories to farms to families around the world. The human cost is mounting by the day. So let me be absolutely clear. Weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz is not an act of aggression against one nation. It is economic terrorism against every nation. And no country should be allowed to hold Hormuz hostage.
The minister emphasized that energy security is not just a slogan, but the bedrock of market stability. Despite the hits taken by state oil giant ADNOC, the UAE confirmed it is deploying extraordinary measures to maintain supply and safety for its international stakeholders. The UAE called on the global community to act as architects of stability rather than mere spectators to the volatility. Al Jaber concluded by inviting world leaders to a critical working session on global energy resilience at the upcoming ADIPEC conference this November.
Not now, not ever. This is not a supply issue. It is a security issue and has only one durable answer: keeping the strait open. We cannot trade our way out of this crisis.
As President Trump's 5-day extension on his ultimatum to Iran continues to count down, the UAE's message is clear. Any continued disruption to the flow of energy through Hormuz is a direct threat to every nation, ally, and adversary alike. This has been Joy Tabanao, your global citizen correspondent reporting for Newsline World.
Following the fairy tale ending of Benedict and Sophie, fans are eagerly waiting to see which Bridgerton sibling, Eloise or Francesca, will take center stage in the upcoming 5th season. Meanwhile, Disney has unveiled the second trailer for its live-action Moana, featuring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as Maui, and giving fans a first look at beloved characters and magical island adventures. Here's Andrea Santos for the updates.
Fans of Bridgerton have been eagerly waiting to discover who will lead the 5th season of the hit Netflix series. Following the fairy tale conclusion of Benedict and Sophie's love story last month, speculation has been rampant about which Bridgerton sibling will take center stage next. The contenders, Eloise or Francesca, with viewers wondering who will headline the next season in the beloved period drama. Netflix has kept details under wraps, but fans remain hopeful that the next season will deliver another captivating love story filled with drama, passion, and the signature Bridgerton charm. Disney has released the second trailer for its upcoming live-action adaptation of Moana, giving fans their first look at Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as Maui. The trailer, released on March 23, features Moana walking along the beach with Grandma Tala, enjoying time with her community and playing with her pet Poa. Moana's father, Chief Tui, portrayed by John Tui, also appeared, sharing a heartfelt moment with his daughter. The live-action remake promises to bring the beloved animated classic to life with stunning visuals, beloved characters, and the same adventurous spirit that made the original a worldwide hit. And that's all for now. I'm Andrea Santos, bringing you the latest showbuzz.
In a remarkable tale of instinct and resilience, 7 pet dogs in China escaped from captivity and journeyed approximately 17 kilometers over 2 days to find their way back home, capturing global attention after the story went viral online. Stella Maris for the story.
7 dogs in China have captured the hearts of millions online with their remarkable teamwork. They were allegedly stolen for the illegal dog meat trade, but made a dramatic escape from a moving vehicle. Despite unfamiliar surroundings, the group stayed close and embarked on an extraordinary journey, walking 17 kilometers to return home. In footage taken on a highway in Cancun, Guilin province, the dogs can be seen forming a protective circle around an injured German shepherd, while a corgi, who seems to be the leader of the pack, kept glancing back to make sure none were left behind. The group also included golden retrievers, Labradors, and Pekingese dogs, all working together to stay safe and navigate the roads. Witnesses and local reports suggest the dogs navigated both roads and rural paths, covering nearly 17 kilometers in total. The corgi appeared to take the lead, guiding the group and helping keep them together throughout the trek. The dogs were eventually spotted by residents who recognized them and helped ensure their safe return to their owners. The story quickly spread across social media platforms, with many praising the animals' loyalty, intelligence, and determination. The incident has since been widely reported by regional and international outlets, further amplifying the story's reach and sparking conversations about animal welfare and pet safety. The viral journey of the 7 dogs has not only warmed hearts worldwide, but also highlighted the strong homing instincts of dogs. This has been Stella Maris, your citizen correspondent, reporting for Newsline World.
And before we end, may you be inspired with the words of the sun. In everything you want to do, if you are committed, if you are consistent, you will succeed. And that's all for today's edition of Newsline World. For God and my beloved country, the Philippines, I'm Carlo de la Peña. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
This is SMNI News Channel. Truth that matters.